I thought someone was stalking me. Until I found out what was really happening, I genuinely thought I was being stalked for almost 6 months. And looking back, I don't think most people would have handled it any better. This started right after I moved into a new apartment. I was 24 at the time, living alone for the first time, new city, new job, new everything. The apartment itself wasn't amazing. It was old, the walls were thin, the elevator barely worked, but it was affordable. And honestly, that was all I cared about. For the first month, nothing happened. My life was pretty boring. Wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. Then one morning, I opened my front door and found a sticky note. At first, I almost ignored it. I thought it was an advertisement or something, but then I noticed there was handwriting on it, just 6 words. Close your bedroom window tonight. That's it. No name, no explanation, no apartment number, nothing. I actually laughed. I remember thinking, okay, that's weird. I looked around the hallway. Nobody. I checked both ends. Still nobody. So I threw the note away and left for work. I didn't think about it again until later that night. Around 11 p.m., I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard something outside. Not loud, just enough to make me look up. That's when I realized my bedroom window was still open. I got up to close it. And the second I reached the window, I froze. Because standing in the parking lot below was someone looking directly up at my apartment. I couldn't see their face. It was too dark. But I could tell they were staring at my building. I immediately stepped back from the window. My heart started racing. For maybe 30 seconds, I just stood there, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. When I finally looked again, the person was gone. I checked the parking lot. Nothing. No cars leaving, no footsteps, nobody. And suddenly, that note from earlier didn't seem so random anymore. The next morning, I checked my door before leaving. Nothing. No note. No explanation. Just an empty hallway. For the next few days, everything was normal. Then another note appeared. This one was somehow even stranger. It said, "Your package is downstairs." Now here's the weird part. I wasn't expecting a package. At least I didn't think I was. So I checked my email. Nothing. Checked Amazon. Nothing. Checked every delivery app I had. Nothing. But curiosity got the better of me. So I went downstairs. And sitting next to the mailboxes was a small cardboard box with my name on it. Apparently it had been delivered the day before. I had completely forgotten about it. At this point, I started getting uncomfortable because now there were only 2 possibilities. Either somebody in the building was paying an unusual amount of attention to me, or somebody knew things about my life they definitely shouldn't know. And neither option made me feel great. Then the notes started appearing more often. "Your headlights are still on." They were. "You're going to be late if you leave at 8. I left at 8 anyway. There was an accident on the highway. I was 40 minutes late. "Call your mother." I ignored that one. Until my mom called me later that evening asking why I hadn't answered her messages for a week. Every single note was correct. Every single one. And honestly, that was what scared me the most, because whoever was leaving them never asked for anything. They never threatened me, never tried to contact me, never wanted money, nothing. They just knew things they shouldn't have known. And after about 2 months, I became obsessed with finding out who it was.
My dad left me a locked box and told me never to open it. When I was 17, my dad gave me a small metal box. It wasn't anything special. No markings, no labels, just a heavy steel box with a tiny lock on the front. Then he told me something I'll never forget. "Don't open it until after I'm gone." I laughed. I thought he was joking, but he wasn't smiling. He just stared at me, waiting for me to answer. So I nodded and said, "Okay." And that was that. The box went into my closet. Life moved on. Years passed. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it. Every now and then I'd see it while cleaning. I'd pick it up, shake it, try to guess what was inside. But I never opened it. Partly because I respected my dad, and partly because I was afraid I'd find out something I didn't want to know. Then, when I was 28, my dad passed away. It happened suddenly. One week we were talking on the phone. The next week he was gone. The months afterward were a blur. Paperwork, funeral arrangements, family visits, the usual stuff. Then one day, while cleaning out my apartment, I found the box again, sitting exactly where I'd left it. For a long time, I just stared at it, because now I had a choice. The one thing my dad had told me not to do, I was finally allowed to do. The problem was, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The mystery had become part of my life. Opening it meant the mystery would end forever. But eventually, curiosity won. I grabbed a screwdriver, pried the lock apart, and opened the lid. Inside was a single envelope. Nothing else. Just one envelope. On the front, in my dad's handwriting, were the words, "For when you're ready, not for after I'm gone, not open immediately, just for when you're ready. At that point, I should have known something was strange, but I opened it anyway. Inside was a letter. The first line made my stomach drop. It said, "If you're reading this before your 30th birthday, stop now." I actually laughed. My dad had always loved messing with people, but then I checked my age. I was 28, and suddenly it wasn't funny anymore. I kept reading. The letter went on. "If you're reading this early, you'll probably ignore what I'm about to say." That's exactly what I would have done. But trust me, wait. That was it. No explanation. Nothing. Just instructions to wait. For 2 more years, I was annoyed. And honestly, a little angry. I'd spent over a decade wondering what was in that box, and all I got was another mystery. For the next few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why 30? Why not 25? Why not after he died? Why specifically 30? Then I noticed something else. At the bottom of the letter was a bank account number and a note. Check the balance on your 30th birthday. That's when things got weird, because my dad wasn't rich, not even close. He worked normal jobs his entire life. So I assumed maybe there was a few $100s in the account, maybe a small gift, maybe enough to buy dinner. Nothing major. 2 years passed, slowly, painfully. And eventually, my 30th birthday arrived. The first thing I did that morning was check the account. I expected almost nothing. Instead, I nearly dropped my phone. The balance was over 80,000 euros. I checked again, then again. Same number, 80,000 euros, just sitting there. I immediately called the bank. I was convinced there had been some mistake. There wasn't. The account was real. The money was real. And according to the records, my dad had been making deposits into it for nearly 20 years. Tiny deposits, sometimes 10 euros, sometimes 20, sometimes 50, week after week, month after month. For 2 decades, I couldn't believe it. The man drove the same old car for 15 years. He rarely bought new clothes. He never took expensive holidays. And now I was finding out why. But the biggest surprise came later, because that wasn't the entire account. The bank informed me there was a safety deposit box attached to it, one I now had access to. The following weekend, I went to the branch, signed the paperwork, and opened the box. Inside was another letter. Of course there was. By this point, I should have expected it. The second letter was much longer, and it explained everything. Apparently, my dad had grown up extremely poor. There were times when he didn't know where his next meal was coming from. Times when his family had to choose between heating the house and buying groceries. He never wanted his children to experience that. So when I was born, he started saving. Not because he expected me to need the money, but because he wanted me to have options. Then came the line that hit me the hardest. If you're opening this at 30, you've already learned how to survive on your own. That's why I made you wait. If I'd given this to you at 18, it would have changed your decisions. If I'd given it to you at 21, it would have changed your priorities. But by 30, you've already become who you're going to be. I had to stop reading for a minute because I realized he was right. At 18, I would have spent it. At 21, I would have made reckless decisions. At 25, I probably would have quit jobs just because I knew I had a safety net. But at 30, I saw the money differently. Not as an escape, not as a shortcut, as an opportunity. The final sentence of the letter was the one I'll remember forever. It said, "This was never about the money. It was about making sure you knew you could make it without it." I sat there for a long time after reading that, longer than I'd like to admit, because suddenly that little metal box wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a lesson, and honestly, it might have been the smartest thing my dad ever did.